The Supreme Court has ventured once again into the debate on freebies. The top court made a scathing observation against states, saying that the states had money to distribute freebies to people who do not work but claim financial constraints when they have to pay salaries and pensions to judges of district judiciary. He also said that the judges need to be paid better to ensure a more diversified judiciary was the observation that came in from the bench that was hearing the matter. The Supreme Court made the observation while hearing a plea filed in 2015 by the All India Judges Association. In fact, the bench, like I said, that was hearing the matter, observed that some retired High Court judges were receiving pensions worth barely 15 to 18,000 rupees, and of course called it pitiable, and perhaps rightly so. To discuss that issue and more, I'm now joined by N.S. Napinai, Senior Advocate of the Supreme Court. Later on, we'll also be joined by a political analyst, but we are joined now by Dr. Piyush Joshi, political analyst. Thank you very much, Mr. Joshi and Ms. Napinai, for joining us tonight on India Tonight. Very apt and much needed observation indeed. Let me come to you first, Dr. Joshi. That point about fixing salaries of retired judges of district and high court, but most importantly on that issue of freebies, given that you have the Aam Aadmi Party, the Congress Party and BJP, all three parties trying to outdo each other ahead of Delhi elections. But the bigger question is, what's making the top court make these announcements and make these observations ahead of Delhi elections? Is it routine?
The Honorable Supreme Court has made certain observations in the past as well when it came to the promises of freebies. Yes. Remember the Tamil Nadu election when Jayalalitha and the DMK, AIADMK and the DMK did promise a lot of freebies, including color televisions and whatnot. So certainly, and as far as the pensions are concerned, salaries are concerned, arrears are concerned, fiscal prudence is always cited as a restraint. So basically, of course, the Supreme Court is well within its rights as the top court of the land to say that, you have money to give, to offer to people who actually do not deserve or not doing any work, So when it comes to the salaries of employees and judges, you cite the fiscal condition of the states. So Supreme Court is right in mentioning that, the commonest, because I'm not an expert on finance and economics, I'm basically a political analyst and a political commentator. So when it comes to that, when I analyze from the political standpoint, why more and more political parties are basically rolling out doles right, one after another elections. The reason is that after the Ladli Bahin, the Congress started registering the female voters for this female yes, pension scheme. And the BJP actually rolled it out and they won the election. And similarly, the cards were reversed when it came to the state of Maharashtra and Haryana. So that prompted the political parties that, to announce something of the nature of Ladki Bahina or Ladli Bahin will basically ensure a victory.
Absolutely.
Actually, it's not like that. The problem is, the communist, I'll take just 30 seconds more. The communist explanation
the assumption, Dr. Joshi, the assumption, yes, Dr. Joshi, is here that it's only the Ladki Bahin Yojana. It's only the Ladki Bahin Yojana that actually led the BJP to that kind of a stellar victory that it got in Maharashtra. So it's the assumption, which might not be true as well.
Certainly, because there were n number of factors at play. The lack of any chief ministerial phase, the infighting amongst the Shiv Sena and the Shiv Sena Uddhav fraction and the NCP Pawar fraction and Congress, amongst who's going to be the chief ministerial phase. So lots of factors were operational then, and including the work of Shinde government. So what is happening here, the communist explanation given by all the political parties is that it's a welfare scheme, and it's the duty of the state to engage in welfare scheme, and direct benefit transfer is a type of that. But when you talk about that, you have to understand, I personally compare this as, between a comparison between Revdi and a recharge. So when you are going for a prepaid recharge, you get certain services for free. You get an outgoing call free. In certain cases, you get a roaming free. But for that, you need to have the money in your pocket. So we need to keep the debt to GDP ratio of different states into account. We need to look at their state of revenue surplus. Absolutely. So those states who are actually having very low debt to GDP ratio or running a government of revenue surplus and presenting budgets and budgets after revenue surplus, they can very well afford to engage in such kind of welfare schemes. but not those states who are having a debt to GDP ratio of 20, 29, 30, 40%. And that's where the problem arises.
Absolutely.
That's where the states become
Absolutely,
fiscally
Dr.
vulnerable.
Joshi, but it can't just always be one state actually giving out these doles and others will stop, because I mean, you know, past data has shown, or at least these political parties believe, that if you give out more doles, more freebies, then more voters will vote for you, and that definitely is one of the arguments. And let me take that point across to Ms. Napinai, and thank you very much, ma'am, for patiently waiting for so long. I mean, when we talk about doles and promises, you have the Aam Aadmi Party, of course, announcing a free life accident insurance scheme. Then you have the Pujari Granth scheme, Samman Yojana, for 18,000 rupees. It's promising to give to priests. Then in terms of the BJP, well, it's promising 300 units of free electricity, free supply of 20,000 litres of clean water. The Congress Party is also announcing Pyari Didi Yojana, wherein it's promising to sort of give 2,500 rupees to women per month. But the big question is, are you convinced with the arguments that these parties have made with respect to funding of these schemes without actually putting a burden on the state exchequer?
This is actually a very complex debate that you have taken on today. I must commend you for trying to capture the essence of this issue in a few minutes. So let me just deconstruct the statement of the Supreme Court in its two components and then answer your question. The first part of it is with respect to ensuring worthy candidates for the judiciary, and to do so with sufficient and proper recompense. And that is a criticality which should be addressed independent of this issue of freebies. And that's just my opinion at a first level. The second aspect of it is the freebie culture is something which I feel as an individual, as a citizen, and now, you know, we can't even use the words Aam Aadmi because that may indicate a party. So I mean Aam Aadmi as a common man here. So as a common man, I personally feel that we have not been in favor of freebies, whichever the party that may be which is offering it. But there is a very interesting twist from what the CEC chair has said, the chief has said. What he is saying is it's very difficult to delineate what is a freebie and what is a welfare scheme. And therefore, they seem to have taken the stance that if you can explain where the money is going to come from for a scheme, maybe that will put the voter on notice on whether this is a freebie attempt or if it is a welfare scheme. Again, I'm a little skeptical about that working effectively also. Then where does it leave us? You know, when the arguments were going on with respect to the freebies case before the Supreme Court, the issue was with respect to the 2013 judgment, the Subramaniam Balaji case, where the court had to decide in terms of whether something is being offered as a bribe, which can it amount to bribery, or is it something which is a welfare scheme. So I feel that maybe now the time is right for a provision within the Representation of People's Act itself to be implemented, or for courts to come out with some kind of guidelines to explain and delineate these two aspects, to show when, you know, just a small thing, maybe in typical code of conduct methodology, maybe we could introduce a time frame from which no scheme can be floated. But the counter-argument to that would be, then would welfare schemes then be affected? Should we have a multi-party committee then deciding whether something is a welfare scheme and ensuring that it is being implemented across the board so that no single party can then take the benefit of it? See, these are all suggestions. Today, where we stand is that we are still looking for solutions, either from the executive or from the judicial.
Absolutely. Right. Right, and that very important point that you make about the intervention of judiciary, although in the same case itself, ma'am, that you were mentioning, the judiciary mentioned that there is no need for an intervention by the Supreme Court, and we'll come to that point on whether a separate committee needs to be made to look into this matter. But let me take a point across to Dr. Piyush Joshi, because, you know, many a times it is assumed that populism is pro-public, but, you know, in several of the cases that have happened, for instance, when governments raise revenue through taxes, they use use money, that money to fund these schemes and then inherit debt. And more importantly, there are several cases where promises have been made by political parties. If you see the recent case of Aam Aadmi Party only, in the case of Congress Party as well, and what it's doing in Telangana, their own people are saying that promises have not been met, and same is the case with Aam Aadmi Party as well.
Well, certainly that's true. Because in Punjab they assessed their debt to GDP ratio, which was actually skyrocketing, and that's when the chief minister came into the picture and explained that the promises for 5 years, and we will start to roll the Mahila Pension Yojana or the 1,000 rupees scheme for the women once we find the state in a fiscally healthy condition. So that's a good take to go forward. I completely agree with that. Unless and until you find yourself having some money in your pocket, you are not supposed to give. When it comes to the state like Delhi, which has a debt to GDP ratio of 2.5%, still you can understand them rolling a freebie or a direct benefit transfer scheme. But when it comes to other states like the state of Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan is having a debt to GDP ratio of 40%, so 39% approximately. So that's where we need to draw a line, that what is your debt to GDP ratio, how many doles you are going to promise in the form of direct benefit transfer, and what is actually a public welfare scheme. So I may put forward a humble suggestion for the benefit of your viewers. We need to divide a line between direct benefit transfer and actual welfare schemes like free healthcare, free education, maybe a free water supply, sometimes 100 units subsidized or without charge and electricity. And that's where we need to draw the line at, because when we start rolling out direct benefit transfer, it's going to be endless, and more decisions are going to come from the governor, from different political parties governing different states. They will not end at 2,500. We have seen Shivraj Singh Chauhan when he announced Ladli Behna, he said that I'm announcing 1,000 rupees welfare scheme right now. I'll increase it to 1,250, and then I'm going to increase it to 3,500 rupees. That was his promise, but the chief minister was changed. So, tomorrow some political party can come and promise a 5,000 rupees direct benefit transfer. So all the direct benefit transfer schemes need to be audited very, very carefully. Yes. The financial health of the states needs to be examined without any favor or power. That's very important, because and Punjab and Rajasthan in the past, when Congress governments did not, why they couldn't go ahead as promised with the direct benefit transfer, because when you are not in a financially healthy position, you need a guarantor.
And absolutely, Mr. Joshi, and we're seeing in several Congress-run states as well, they're increasing the prices of basic essentials.
Ultimately, where are you going to get the money from? You have to tax the people, and ultimately and everybody ends up paying taxes. So I am not for that argument that only the income tax payers are taxpayers and no one else is.
Yes.
So basically, everyone else is paying taxes in the form of increased inflation. You are 85% to 90% of the India's revenue is coming from indirect taxes, the tax revenue. So when we are talking about that, everybody ends up paying taxes in the form of inflation. So you need to understand, and actually it's the auditing agencies we need to audit it.
It doesn't really benefit anyone.
And yes, and you need to give the CAG some more authority and some more teeth to bite the governments, because it's important. CAG is just doing audit, making recommendations, and is not able to punish states in any particular manner. But then again comes the political argument, me being a political commentator, that the states run by the opposition parties, are selectively targeted, and the Bharatiya Janata Party run states are not targeted. So we are in a difficult spot, and things are not looking very good as of now.
No, I mean, earlier this week, the SP and Congress parties were blaming the BJP for the freebie culture that's going on in the country, and that actually led to a lot of back and forth, and which is where SC's intervention also came in once again on freebies. Let me take the point to you, Ms. Napinai. You were mentioning about a possible committee formation. Now, Mr. Joshi is saying that there has to be a balance between what is welfareism and what is freebies in order to maintain that, India remains a welfare state, and of course, course, there are people who are below the poverty line, who the have-nots, who need to be served as well. So what sort of an intervention in this case is needed? Is it feasible for SC to intervene every time? You also mentioned of a committee, a possible formation of a committee being formed. Could you please elaborate a bit more on that? And most importantly, who will bell the cat in the long run as far as the case of freebies is concerned?
Ultimately, the political parties have to take the responsibility. We can't keep running to courts for remedies each and every time. If you look at how a democracy works, is that a legislator is supposed to legislate, and the courts are only meant to implement that legislation. They're not supposed to legislate. So only where there is a vacuum, that's where up until the point where a legislation comes in, the Supreme Court usually intervenes. So here again, this is a situation where I think all of us should be on the same page to understand how the financial aspect works. I think some very important points were made by the panelists, where he delineated, for instance, between direct payment of cash. So that cannot necessarily be treated as a welfare scheme. It is clearly just a payment to a particular category. So unless some ground rules are laid down on what would amount to a welfare scheme, I think this is going to be just an endless debate. And I also don't agree with the CEC when they say that this is very difficult for us to delineate a welfare scheme as opposed to freebies, and therefore it may not be possible to intervene on that aspect and to limit themselves to just figuring out whether, of disclosures on the funding aspect. I think at some level, there can be certain processes, policies, or code of conduct laid down which can set out what would amount to a freebie, or let's put it the other way, what would amount to a non-welfare scheme. So that could probably be a possibility, right? We don't have to always approach it only from the perspective of freebies. Right. On the committee aspect, what you mentioned, again, I would say self-regulation is always the best form of regulation. And here, the parties or the government should come forward to create a committee to do this.
Right, ma'am. Very, very valid points that you and, of course, Dr. Joshi has made, and because eventually it is the state that really feels the pinch of these, freebies. For example, Maharashtra, I have some data. Estimated cost of freebies was 960 crores given before elections, and that was 2.2% of the state's GDP. Same in the case of Karnataka as well, which is the second highest at 537 and 1.9% of the GDP. Of course, in the end, we're yet to understand or perhaps come at a conclusion on what will it really take to bell the cat. Will it be a committee that needs to look into it? Should there be a separate act that really delineates what are subsidies and what are freebies? And with that, ma'am and sir, thank you very much for joining us this evening on ET Now and sharing your thoughts on that very, very crucial and important issue. As far as, ma'am, you said about political parties need to self-regulate, I'm not really sure whether that can work given our past history as well of these cases as well.